A single dad working double shifts at a diner stopped a violent attack in a parking garage. He never knew the young woman he saved was a billionaire's daughter. Tonight, I'm sharing the story of Hunter Tate, an ex-Navy SEAL turned waiter who became an unlikely hero when he witnessed something horrifying outside an upscale restaurant in downtown Sterling Heights. What he didn't know was that saving one person's life would unravel a dangerous conspiracy, transform his struggling existence, and prove that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is act when everyone else freezes. Stay with me until the end, and comment below with your city, so I can see how far this story travels around the world. The November wind cut through the streets like a knife that Thursday evening, the kind of cold that made your bones ache and reminded you that winter was coming whether you were ready or not. Hunter Tate stood outside Bellamy's fine dining, watching luxury cars pull up to the valet stand. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The November wind cut through the streets like a knife that Thursday evening, the kind of cold that made your bones ache and reminded you that winter was coming whether you were ready or not. Hunter Tate stood outside Bellamy's fine dining, watching luxury cars pull up to the valet stand across the street while he waited for his shift to end. His waiter's uniform was clean but worn, the black pants faded from too many washes, the white shirt pressed but showing its age around the collar. He'd been on his feet for 9 hours, serving overpriced steaks to people who tipped well but never really looked at him. That was fine. Hunter preferred being invisible these days. At 36 years old, he'd learned that staying under the radar was safer than standing out. Safer for him, safer for his daughter, safer for the quiet life he was desperately trying to build from the wreckage of his past. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Mrs. Alvarez, his neighbor who watched 7-year-old Jade during his evening shifts. She finished her homework and ate all her vegetables. Reading in bed now. Take your time. Hunter's chest tightened with that familiar mixture of gratitude and guilt. Gratitude because Mrs. Alvarez was a godsend, never asking for much despite watching Jade 5 nights a week. Guilt because he should be there, tucking his daughter in, reading her the bedtime story, being present for the small moments that made up a life. But rent didn't pay itself. Neither did the stack of medical bills from last year when Jade had gotten pneumonia and spent 3 terrifying days in the hospital. Neither did the car payment on the 10-year-old sedan that barely started on cold mornings but was all he could afford. So Hunter worked. Breakfast shift at Rosie's Diner from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, racing home to spend exactly 47 minutes with Jade before Mrs. Alvarez arrived and he headed to his evening shift at Bellamy's. He worked until closing at 11, dragged himself home, collapsed into bed for 5 hours, then did it all again. It was brutal. It was exhausting. But every time Jade wrapped her skinny arms around his neck and said, "I love you, Daddy," Hunter knew it was worth every sleepless hour. The kitchen manager, Tony, stuck his head out the back door. "Tate, you're cut. Good work tonight. See you tomorrow." "Thanks, Tony." Hunter pulled off his apron and grabbed his jacket from the break room. A heavy canvas thing he'd had since his service days. It still fit, though everything else from that life was long gone. Navy SEAL. It felt like a different person now, someone he'd been in another lifetime. 6 years of service, 3 deployments, more combat than most people could imagine. He'd been good at it, too. Maybe too good. The kind of good that meant they kept sending you back. Kept putting you in situations where the choices were all bad, and you just had to pick the least terrible option. Then came the mission that went sideways. The one that still woke him up sometimes at 3 in the morning, heart pounding, hands shaking. The one that got 2 of his teammates killed and left Hunter with a medical discharge, a Purple Heart he kept in a drawer, and enough guilt to last several lifetimes. He'd come home to find his wife, Vanessa, had decided she didn't sign up to be married to a broken man with PTSD and night terrors. The divorce papers were waiting on the kitchen table. She'd left Jade with a neighbor and disappeared to find herself somewhere on the West Coast. That was 4 years ago. Hunter hadn't heard from her since, so he'd done what he always did. He adapted. He survived. He found work that didn't require explanations or background checks that would dig too deep. He became a waiter, a short order cook, a guy who showed up and did the work and didn't cause problems. And he raised Jade, beautiful, smart, funny Jade, who had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn determination. She was the only good thing in his life, the only thing that mattered. Hunter walked through Sterling Heights' downtown district, past boutiques and art galleries and coffee shops that charged $8 for a latte. This neighborhood was for people with money, people whose biggest worry was whether to summer in the Hamptons or Martha's Vineyard. Hunter lived 12 blocks south, where the buildings were older and the streets were louder, and people worked 3 jobs just to survive. 2 different worlds separated by a handful of city blocks. His phone buzzed again. A text from Danny, his buddy from Rosie's Diner who also worked nights at a gas station. "Did you see they're hiring at the shipping warehouse? Day shift, decent pay. You interested?" Hunter typed back, "Can't do days. Need to be with Jade after school." "Right, forgot. You're a good dad, man." Hunter didn't feel like a good dad. Good dads didn't miss school plays because they were working. Good dads didn't serve their daughters boxed macaroni and cheese 4 nights a week because that's what they could afford. Good dads didn't lie awake at night doing math in their heads, trying to figure out how to stretch $47 until next Friday's paycheck. But he was trying. God. He was trying so hard. The parking garage adjacent to Bellamy's was where employees parked. 5 levels of concrete and fluorescent lights that flickered ominously. Hunter's car was on level 3, and he took the stairs because the elevator was broken more often than it worked. His footsteps echoed in the stairwell, a lonely sound that reminded him how empty these places became after dark. The 3rd level door was heavy, requiring a solid push to open. Hunter stepped into the garage, scanning automatically. Old habits from military training that never quite left. The level was mostly empty now, just a dozen cars scattered across painted spaces. His sedan sat in the far corner, right where he'd left it 9 hours ago. Hunter dug his keys from his pocket and started walking, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. That's when he heard it, a scream, sharp, terrified, cut short like someone had clamped a hand over a mouth. Hunter froze, every nerve suddenly alert. The sound had come from somewhere ahead, maybe near the exit ramp on the far side. He strained to hear, his heart rate already climbing. There. Voices. Male. Urgent. Angry. And underneath it, a muffled sound that might have been someone trying to cry for help. For one long second, Hunter stood perfectly still, his mind racing through calculations. This wasn't his problem. He should call 911, let the police handle it, get to his car, and go home to Jade. But even as he thought it, his feet were already moving forward, his body responding to instincts buried deeper than conscious thought. Someone was in trouble, someone needed help, and Hunter Tate, despite everything he'd been through, despite all the reasons to stay out of it, had never been the kind of man who walked away. Hunter moved quickly, but quietly through the parking garage, staying close to the parked cars, using them for cover as he approached the source of the disturbance. The SEAL training was still there, muscle memory that kicked in without conscious thought. Stay low. Control your breathing. Assess before engaging. As he rounded a concrete pillar near the exit ramp, the scene came into view and his blood turned to ice. A young woman, maybe early 20s, was being dragged toward a black van by 3 men. She was fighting hard, thrashing and kicking, her designer purse already on the ground, its contents scattered across the oil-stained concrete. Even from 30 feet away, Hunter could see the terror in her eyes. The woman was striking, with long dark hair and features that suggested wealth and privilege. She wore an expensive-looking coat and heels that were completely impractical for fighting off attackers. One of her shoes had already come off in the struggle. The men were professionals. Hunter could tell immediately from the way they moved, coordinated and efficient. 2 of them had her arms, controlling her body, while the 3rd worked to get the van's sliding door open. They wore dark clothing, gloves, faces, partially obscured by baseball caps, pulled low. This wasn't a random mugging. This was a planned abduction. Hunter's mind went through options in the space of a heartbeat. He was unarmed. He was outnumbered 3-1. He had no backup, no weapon, no tactical advantage except surprise. The smart play was to call the police and hope they arrived before the van left. But that would take minutes. The woman had seconds. He thought of Jade, sleeping safely at home. What if this was her in 10 years? What if she was the one being dragged toward a van while someone watched and did nothing? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The decision made itself. Hunter pulled his phone out, quickly dialed 911, and as soon as the operator answered, he said in a low, urgent voice, "Abduction in progress. Parking garage at 847 Ashford Avenue, level 3. 3 male suspects, 1 victim. Send units now." He didn't wait for a response, just dropped the phone on the ground where it would keep transmitting his location. Then he moved. "Hey!" Hunter's voice rang out across the concrete expanse, loud and commanding. "Let her go." All 3 men's heads snapped toward him. For a split second, everyone froze. A tableau of violence interrupted. The young woman's eyes found his, desperate and pleading. "Help me, please." The man nearest the van, clearly the leader, made a quick decision. "Handle him," he barked to one of his partners. "Make it quick." The designated attacker released the woman's arm and turned toward Hunter, pulling something from his jacket. Even in the dim fluorescent light, Hunter recognized the outline of a tactical baton, the kind that extended with a flick of the wrist. The man advanced with the confidence of someone who'd done this before, who expected an average citizen to back down or run when faced with a weapon and serious intent to harm. Hunter didn't back down, he didn't run. Instead, he moved forward to meet the threat, closing distance in a way that surprised his attacker. The man swung the baton in a wide arc, aiming for Hunter's head. It was a powerful swing, but telegraphed, the kind of attack that worked on untrained opponents who froze up. Hunter wasn't untrained. He ducked under the swing, stepped inside the man's reach, and drove his elbow up into the attacker's solar plexus with every ounce of force he could generate. The impact drove the air from the man's lungs with a whoosh. Before he could recover, Hunter grabbed the wrist holding the baton, twisted hard, and used the man's own momentum to send him crashing face first into a concrete pillar. The attacker dropped like a stone, unconscious before he hit the ground. The whole exchange took maybe 4 seconds. The 2 remaining men stared at Hunter with new appreciation and wariness. The young woman took advantage of their distraction, wrenching herself free and stumbling backward, putting distance between herself and her attackers. "Run!" Hunter shouted at her. "Get out of here." But she didn't run. Maybe she was too terrified, too disoriented. Maybe her legs wouldn't cooperate. She just stood there, shaking, one shoe on and one shoe off, looking like she might collapse at any moment. The leader cursed and made a decision. "Forget her, take him down, now." Both men rushed Hunter simultaneously, one from each side, trying to overwhelm him with numbers. It was a sound tactical decision. Even trained fighters struggled against multiple coordinated opponents. Hunter had been in worse situations. Ambushes in Afghanistan, close quarters combat in buildings rigged with explosives. Firefights where the only thing between him and death was training, instinct, and the will to survive. This was just another fight. He met the first attacker with a brutal front kick that caught the man in the knee, hyperextending it with a sickening pop. The man screamed and went down, clutching his ruined leg. But the leader was faster, smarter. He didn't try to grapple or strike. Instead, he pulled a knife from his belt, a serious blade that caught the fluorescent light as he moved in fast and low. Hunter saw the knife, felt his body respond with trained reflexes. He pivoted, trying to avoid the blade's path, but the garage floor was slick with oil, and his feet slipped slightly. The knife that should have missed entirely caught him across the ribs instead, slicing through his jacket and the shirt beneath, opening a line of fire across his left side. Pain exploded, sharp and hot, but Hunter's training overrode it. Pain was information. Pain meant you were alive. Deal with the threat first, assess the damage later. He grabbed the leader's knife hand, controlling the weapon, and delivered a devastating headbutt that broke the man's nose with a crunch of cartilage. Blood sprayed. The leader staggered backward, stunned. Hunter should have pressed the advantage. Should have finished it. But the wound in his side was deeper than he'd realized, and he felt blood soaking through his shirt, warm and sticky. His vision swam slightly, adrenaline and pain mixing into something that made the world feel distant and surreal. The leader recovered faster than Hunter expected, professional training showing through. He wiped blood from his face, reassessed the situation with cold eyes, and made another tactical decision. This isn't worth it, he snarled to his remaining conscious partner. We're out. They grabbed their unconscious companion, dragged him toward the van, and within seconds were gone, tires squealing as they raced down the exit ramp and disappeared into the night. And then there was silence. Just Hunter, bleeding and swaying on his feet, and the young woman he'd saved, staring at him with wide eyes filled with shock and something that might have been awe. Are you okay? Hunter managed to ask, his voice rough. The adrenaline was fading now, and the pain was getting louder, harder to ignore. Am I okay? The woman's voice was shaky but incredulous. You're bleeding. You're hurt. Why would you do that? You could have been killed. Hunter pressed his hand against his side, feeling the warm blood seeping between his fingers. Someone needed help, he said simply, as if that explained everything. In the distance, sirens began to wail, growing closer. The young woman took a step toward him, then another, moving carefully on her one remaining shoe. What's your name? Hunter. His vision was definitely swimming now, the edges getting fuzzy. Hunter Tate. I'm Skylar, she said. Skylar Bowen. The name meant nothing to Hunter. He swayed, suddenly aware of how much blood he was losing. Skylar rushed forward just as his knees buckled, catching him, supporting his weight, despite being half his size. Stay with me, she said urgently. Help is coming. Just stay with me. Hunter wanted to tell her he'd be fine, that he'd survived worse, but the words wouldn't come. The parking garage was spinning now, fluorescent lights streaking across his vision like comets. The last thing he heard before the darkness took him was Skylar's voice, desperate and commanding. Don't you dare die on me. Don't you dare. Hunter woke to the harsh brightness of hospital lights and the steady beep of monitors. For a disorienting moment, he thought he was back in the military hospital in Germany, recovering from the mission that had ended his career. Then reality reassembled itself in fragments. The parking garage, the attack, the knife, Jade. He tried to sit up, panic flooding through him. He needed to get to Jade, needed to make sure she was okay, needed to. Whoa, easy there. Strong hands pressed him back down. A nurse, middle-aged with kind eyes and zero tolerance for nonsense, stood beside his bed. You just had surgery, Mr. Tate. You're not going anywhere for a while. My daughter. Hunter's voice came out as a croak. I need to call my daughter. Your neighbor brought her by earlier. Sweet little girl. She's in the waiting room with Mrs. Alvarez right now. They've been here all night. All night. Hunter looked toward the window and saw dawn light creeping across the sky. He'd lost an entire night. What time is it? Just after 6 in the morning. You've been in and out since they brought you in around 11 last night. The nurse checked his foreign monitors with efficient movements. The knife wound required 43 stitches. You're lucky it didn't hit anything vital. But you lost a fair amount of blood. The doctor will want to keep you another day for observation. A day. Hunter couldn't afford to be in the hospital for a day. He had shifts at both jobs, bills that wouldn't wait, responsibilities that couldn't be postponed. I need to leave, he said, trying again to sit up. This time the movement sent a spike of pain through his side that made his vision blur. He fell back against the pillows, breathing hard. Like I said, you're not going anywhere. The nurse's expression softened slightly. Mr. Tate, You did something incredibly brave last night. The young woman you saved, she's been here all night too, along with what appears to be half the Sterling Heights Police Department, and some very serious-looking people in expensive suits. Whatever you stumbled into, it's a big deal." Before Hunter could process that information, the door opened, and a man in a detective's badge entered, followed by a woman in a perfectly tailored business suit who radiated authority and wealth in equal measure. "Mr. Tate," the detective said, pulling up a chair. "I'm Detective Hayes. This is Alana Reeves, head of security for the Bowen family. We need to ask you some questions about last night." The Bowen family. The name tickled something in Hunter's memory, but he couldn't quite place it. "Is Skylar okay?" he asked instead. "Miss Bowen is perfectly safe, thanks to you." Alana Reeves spoke with crisp precision, her sharp eyes assessing Hunter like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "What you did last night was extraordinarily brave and, frankly, foolish. Those men were professionals, armed, trained, and very dangerous." "I noticed," Hunter said dryly, gesturing to his bandaged torso. Detective Hayes pulled out a notebook. "Can you walk me through what happened? Everything you remember." Hunter recounted the events as clearly as he could. The scream, his decision to intervene, the fight, the knife. He kept his descriptions factual and precise, old military habits of after-action reporting surfacing naturally. When he finished, Detective Hayes and Alana exchanged a look that Hunter couldn't quite read. "Mr. Tate," Alana said carefully, "do you know who Skylar Bowen is?" "She told me her name. That's all I know." Skylar Bowen is the daughter of Richard Bowen, founder and CEO of Bowen Technologies. Her father is worth approximately $8 billion. Alana paused to let that sink in. Last night's attack wasn't random. It was a targeted kidnapping, likely for ransom. We've been tracking credible threats against the family for 3 months. $8 billion. Hunter's exhausted brain tried to process that number and failed. He'd saved a billionaire's daughter. He'd gotten stabbed protecting someone who probably had more money in her checking account than he'd earn in 10 lifetimes. "The men who attacked her," Detective Hayes continued, "we believe they're part of a larger operation. Professional kidnappers who've been targeting wealthy families up and down the East Coast. You interrupted a very well-planned abduction, Mr. Tate. If you hadn't intervened when you did, Miss Bowen would be in a very bad situation right now." "Is she going to be okay?" Hunter asked. "Physically, mentally, is she?" "She's shaken, but unharmed. Thanks to you." Alana's expression softened fractionally. "She's been asking about you constantly. Insisted on staying at the hospital all night to make sure you survived surgery. She's quite adamant about thanking you properly." There was a knock on the door, and before anyone could respond, it opened. Skylar Bowen walked in, and Hunter barely recognized her as the terrified woman from the parking garage. She'd changed clothes, pulled herself together, but her eyes were red-rimmed from crying and exhaustion. When she saw Hunter awake, relief flooded her face. "You're alive," she breathed. "Thank God, you're alive." "Miss Bowen," Alana said firmly. "The doctor said only a few minutes." "I don't care what the doctor said." Skylar moved to Hunter's bedside, her composure cracking. "You saved my life. You could have died. You should have just called the police and stayed safe, but you didn't. You ran toward 3 armed men to help a complete stranger." "Someone needed help," Hunter said. The same words he'd used last night. It was the only explanation that made sense to him. Skylar pulled up a chair and sat down, leaning forward intently. "Do you have any idea what would have happened to me if you hadn't been there? What those men would have done?" Hunter did have an idea, actually. He'd seen enough darkness in the world to imagine it pretty clearly. That's why he'd intervened. "I did what anyone would do," he said. "No." Skylar's voice was fierce. "Most people would have hidden, would have called the police and hoped for the best, would have protected themselves first. But you didn't hesitate. Alana showed me the security footage from the garage. You moved like a professional, like someone with serious training. Hunter stayed quiet. He didn't want to talk about his past, about the skills that had made him effective in that parking garage. That part of his life was supposed to be over. Detective Hayes cleared his throat. Miss Bowen, we should let Mr. Tate rest. I want to hire him, Skylar said suddenly, looking at Alana. For my personal security detail, someone who can actually protect me, not just stand around looking intimidating. Miss Bowen, we have an entire team of highly qualified, Alana began, who weren't there last night when I needed them. Skylar's voice turned cold, showing a flash of the steel that probably ran in her family. This man risked his life for mine. I trust him. I'm not for hire, Hunter interjected, feeling the conversation spiraling away from him. I have a daughter. I have 2 jobs. I'm just a waiter who happened to be in the right place at the wrong time. A waiter, Skylar repeated slowly. You work at Bellamy's? And Rosie's Diner, morning and evening shifts. She stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. You work 2 jobs. Some of us have to. It came out sharper than Hunter intended, but exhaustion and pain were making him irritable. Skylar flinched at the tone but didn't back down. I want to help you, to repay what you did. Let me. I don't want your money, Hunter interrupted. I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because it was right. The room fell silent. Alana was watching Hunter with new interest, like she was reassessing her entire evaluation. Detective Hayes looked uncomfortable, and Skylar looked like she might start crying again. At least let me cover your medical bills, Skylar said quietly. Please. You're here because of me. That's not debatable. Hunter wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain his pride and independence. But the practical part of his brain, the part that had been doing math on medical costs since he woke up, knew he couldn't afford to refuse. Hospital bills would bury him. He was already drowning in debt from Jade's pneumonia last year. Fine, he said finally. The medical bills. But that's it. I don't want anything else. We'll see, Skylar said. And there was something in her expression that suggested this conversation was far from over. Before Hunter could respond, another knock sounded, and Mrs. Alvarez peeked in. Jade's hand clutched firmly in hers. His daughter's eyes were huge and frightened, her face pale. Daddy. Jade pulled free from Mrs. Alvarez and rushed to the bedside, tears streaming down her face. You're hurt. Mrs. Alvarez said you got hurt helping someone, and I was so scared. Hunter's heart shattered. He reached out his good arm and pulled Jade as close as he could manage without aggravating his wound. Hey, baby girl, I'm okay. I promise I'm okay. You're in the hospital. That's not okay. Jade was crying in earnest now, her small body shaking with sobs. Everyone else in the room quietly filed out, giving them privacy. Hunter held his daughter and let her cry, whispering reassurances, promising he wasn't going anywhere, that he'd be home soon, that everything would be fine. But even as he made those promises, Hunter knew everything had changed. He'd saved someone important, someone powerful, someone who apparently didn't take no for an answer. His quiet, anonymous life was over. He just didn't realize yet how much that single act of courage would cost him, or how much it would give him in return. Hunter was released from the hospital 2 days later, against medical advice but with grudging acceptance from the doctors who recognized they couldn't keep a determined man against his will. The stitches would need to stay in for 2 weeks. He had prescriptions for antibiotics and pain medication that he couldn't afford even with insurance, and strict instructions to avoid strenuous activity. He walked out of Sterling Heights Memorial with Jade holding his good hand and Mrs. Alvarez carrying the discharge papers, only to find a media circus waiting at the entrance. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions over each other in a cacophony that made Hunter's head pound. Mr. Tate, how does it feel to be a hero? Did you know Skylar Bowen's identity when you saved her? Is it true your ex? Military? What do you say to people calling you the guardian angel of Sterling Heights? Hunter froze on the hospital steps, completely unprepared for the onslaught. Jade pressed against his side, frightened by the crowd and noise. Mrs. Alvarez tried to shield them both, but the reporters were relentless. That's when a black SUV pulled up to the curb, and Alana Reeves emerged like a force of nature. She was flanked by 2 security personnel, who immediately created a perimeter, pushing back the press with professional efficiency. "Mr. Tate, please, this way." Alana gestured to the SUV. "We'll get you home safely." Hunter wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain his independence, but one look at Jade's frightened face made the decision for him. He let Alana guide them to the vehicle, security keeping the reporters at bay as they climbed inside. The SUV's interior was leather and luxury, climate-controlled and whisper-quiet. As they pulled away from the hospital, Hunter could still see camera flashes, reflecting in the tinted windows. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "That was the consequence of saving a billionaire's daughter," Alana said. Matter-of-factly, "The story broke yesterday morning. Your front-page news across 3 states. Ex-Navy SEAL turned waiter stops kidnapping." The media loves this narrative. Working-class hero, dramatic rescue, wealth and danger colliding. It's catnip for them. "How did they know I was ex-military?" Hunter's voice was tight. He'd kept that part of his life private for years, and for good reasons. Public records. Once your name was out there, it took reporters about 6 hours to dig up your service history. Purple Heart recipient, honorable discharge. The whole story. Alana's expression was sympathetic, but unapologetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Tate. Privacy is a casualty of heroism." Jade tugged on Hunter's sleeve. "Daddy, what's a Purple Heart?" "It's a medal they give soldiers who get hurt protecting people," Mrs. Alvarez answered gently. When Hunter couldn't find words, "Like you got hurt protecting that lady?" Jade's eyes were wide and serious. "Yeah, baby. Like that." The drive through Sterling Heights revealed just how much had changed. As they passed Rosie's diner, Hunter saw a news van parked outside. His apartment building had another van stationed near the entrance. His phone, which he'd turned off in the hospital, had 247 missed calls and hundreds of text messages. "It's going to be like this for a while," Alana said, noting his expression. "The public is fascinated by you. The Bowen family would like to offer you enhanced security until the media attention dies down." "I don't need security. With respect, Mr. Tate." "Yes, you do. The men who tried to take Skylar are still out there. They know you can identify them. You're a witness and a liability. The Bowen family takes threats seriously, and you're now connected to that threat, whether you like it or not." The words sent ice through Hunter's veins. He'd been so focused on recovery and getting back to normal that he hadn't considered the danger might not be over. "Are you saying they might come after me? Or your daughter?" Alana's gaze flicked to Jade, then back to Hunter. "I don't mean to frighten you, but you need to understand the situation. Professional kidnappers don't like loose ends. You cost them a very lucrative payday and probably got one of their team arrested. That creates motivation for retaliation." Hunter pulled Jade closer, his mind already running through tactical considerations. His apartment building had minimal security. The diner and Bellamy's were public spaces with dozens of entry points. Jade's school was accessible to anyone who walked through the front door. "What are you proposing?" he asked carefully. "Temporary relocation. The Bowen estate has multiple guest houses. You and Jade would be completely safe there while we track down the remaining suspects. Mr. Bowen is also prepared to offer you a substantial financial package in gratitude for saving his daughter." "I don't want his money, Mr. Tate. Your medical bills alone will be covered by Skylar. We already agreed on that. Anything beyond that, I don't want." Alana studied him with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're either incredibly principled or incredibly stubborn." "Both," Mrs. Alvarez interjected from the back seat. Hunter is both. They pulled up to his apartment building, and Alana's security team did a sweep before allowing them to exit the vehicle. Walking into his own building felt surreal with armed guards, checking corners and clearing hallways. His apartment was exactly as he'd left it 2 days ago. Small, slightly shabby, but home. Jade's drawings covered the refrigerator. Dishes sat in the drying rack. His waiter uniforms hung in the closet, waiting for shifts he wouldn't be working. "Daddy, are we really in danger?" Jade asked, once they were inside, and Mrs. Alvarez had gone to her own apartment. Hunter knelt down to her level, ignoring the pull of stitches. "I'm going to keep you safe, Jade. That's a promise. Nothing bad is going to happen to you. But something bad happened to you." Her lower lip trembled. "You got stabbed. And I'm healing. I'm going to be fine." He pulled her into a careful hug. "Sometimes we have to do scary things to help people. That doesn't mean the scary things will happen to us." She didn't look convinced, and Hunter couldn't blame her. He wasn't entirely convinced himself. His phone rang. The number was unlisted, but something made him answer. "Mr. Tate, this is Richard Bowen." The voice was deep, cultured, carrying the weight of authority and wealth. "I wanted to thank you personally for what you did for my daughter. Skylar is my entire world. If something had happened to her, I don't know what I would have done. I'm glad she's safe," Hunter said honestly. "She speaks very highly of you. Says you're the bravest man she's ever met." There was a pause. "I'd like to meet you in person. Tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it. There are things we should discuss." "Mr. Bowen, if this is about money, it's about gratitude, Mr. Tate, and responsibility, and the future. Please, give me 1 hour of your time. That's all I ask." Hunter looked around his cramped apartment, at Jade playing quietly with her toys, at the stack of bills on the counter that he had no idea how to pay with weeks of missed work ahead of him. "1 hour," he agreed. "Excellent. My driver will pick you up at 10 tomorrow morning. And Mr. Tate, bring Jade. I understand you're a single father. The Bowen estate is very family-friendly. She'll be comfortable there." After the call ended, Hunter stood at his window looking out at the street below. A news van was still parked at the corner. Alana's security team had positioned themselves strategically around the building. His quiet life was well and truly over. Mrs. Alvarez knocked and entered with her arms full of food. "I made extra," she announced, though they both knew she'd made it specifically for them. "Chicken soup, rice, beans. You need to eat to heal." "Thank you." Hunter's voice was rough with emotion. "For everything. For taking care of Jade, for being here, for putting up with all this craziness. You're a good man, Hunter. Good things should happen to good men." She set the food on his counter and turned to face him. "Whatever these rich people are offering you, don't be too proud to accept. Pride doesn't feed children or pay medical bills. It's not about pride. It's about owing people. I don't want to be in anyone's debt. Sometimes accepting help isn't about debt. Sometimes it's about letting people do the right thing, just like you did." She patted his cheek. "Think about it." That night, after Jade was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Hunter sat at his kitchen table scrolling through his phone. The news coverage was everywhere. Photos of him from his military days, images of the hospital, speculation about his relationship with Skylar, opinion pieces about heroism and class divide. One headline caught his attention. "From warrior to waiter to hero, the Hunter Tate story." The article detailed his service record, his Purple Heart, his discharge, his struggles as a single father working multiple jobs. Someone had interviewed coworkers from both his jobs. Tony from Bellamy said, "Hunter's the hardest worker I've ever seen. Shows up on time, never complains, treats everyone with respect." Danny from Rosie's added, "He's raising his daughter alone and doing a damn good job of it. Always talks about her, always puts her first. That's the kind of man who runs toward danger to help someone. It's just who he is." Reading about himself in the third person felt surreal. This wasn't who he thought he was. He was just a guy trying to survive, trying to give his daughter a decent life, trying to make up for all the ways he'd failed. But the world apparently saw something different. They saw a hero. Hunter didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired and scared, and completely out of his depth. Tomorrow he'd go meet a billionaire. Tomorrow he'd enter a world he didn't understand, didn't belong to, had no business being part of, but he'd go anyway. Because despite everything, he was curious about what Richard Bowen wanted to say. And because Mrs. Alvarez was right, pride didn't feed children or pay medical bills. Whatever came next, Hunter would face it the way he faced everything. Head on. With his daughter's well-being as the priority, and the hope that somehow, things would work out. They had to work out. He didn't have any other choice. The Bowen estate sat 30 miles outside Sterling Heights, hidden behind iron gates and mature trees that had probably been planted before Hunter was born. As Alana's SUV wound up the private drive, Hunter pressed his face to the window, trying to process the sheer scale of wealth on display. The main house was a mansion, all stone and glass, and architectural ambition. Manicured lawns stretched in every direction, interrupted by gardens and fountains, and what appeared to be a small lake. Guest houses dotted the property, each one larger than the apartment building where Hunter lived. Jade was equally awed, her nose pressed to the window beside his. "Daddy, is this where the princess lives?" "Not a princess, baby. Just a regular person with a lot of money." "That's not regular," Jade whispered. No, Hunter thought. It definitely wasn't. Richard Bowen met them at the entrance, and he was exactly what Hunter expected. Late 50s, silver hair, handshake firm and assessing. Clothes that probably cost more than Hunter made in a month, but his eyes were kind. And when he looked at Hunter, there was genuine gratitude there. "Mr. Tate, thank you for coming." He knelt down to Jade's level with surprising ease. "And you must be Jade. Your father is very brave. You should be proud of him." "I am," Jade said, shyly. "But I wish he didn't get hurt." "So do I." Richard stood and gestured toward the house. "Please, come in. Skylar is eager to see you both." The interior of the mansion was overwhelming. High ceilings, original artwork, furniture that belonged in museums. Hunter felt completely out of place in his worn jeans and the cleanest shirt he owned. A dressing covering the stitches in his side. Skylar appeared at the top of a grand staircase, and she was transformed from the terrified woman in the parking garage. Confident, poised, dressed casually but expensively. When she saw Hunter, her face lit up with genuine warmth. "You came," she said, hurrying down the stairs. "I wasn't sure you would. Your father can be very persuasive." She laughed, and it was a good sound, free of the trauma that had marked their first meeting. Then she noticed Jade half hiding behind Hunter's leg. "And this must be your daughter, Jade, right?" Jade nodded, still shy. "I have something I think you'll like," Skylar said gently. "There's a playroom upstairs with more toys than any one person needs. Would you like to see it while your dad and I talk with my father?" Jade looked up at Hunter uncertainly. He wanted to keep her close, protective instincts screaming against letting her out of his sight. But she needed to be a kid, not trapped in his fear. "Go ahead, baby. I'll be right here." One of the house staff, a warm woman who introduced herself as Nina, took Jade's hand and led her upstairs. Hunter watched until they disappeared, then turned back to Richard and Skylar. "Shall we talk in my office?" Richard suggested. The office was all dark wood and leather, walls lined with books and awards, windows overlooking the estate. Richard gestured to comfortable chairs arranged around a coffee table, deliberately avoiding sitting behind his imposing desk, creating equality in a space designed to intimidate. "Mr. Tate," Richard began once they were settled, "I want to be direct with you. What you did for my daughter, there's no way to adequately thank you. You risked your life for a stranger. You took a knife wound that could have killed you, You're the reason Skylar is sitting here today instead of being held for ransom or worse. I did what anyone should do, Hunter said automatically, but most people wouldn't. Skylar leaned forward, intense. I've thought about that night constantly. The fear, the helplessness, thinking those were the last moments of my normal life. And then you appeared. You didn't hesitate, didn't calculate odds, didn't worry about getting hurt. You just acted. I have training. Military background. It was instinct. It was courage. Richard corrected firmly. And it's the kind of courage that should be rewarded, not just with gratitude but with tangible support. We've looked into your situation, Mr. Tate. I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but I needed to understand who you are. Hunter tensed. What did you find? A man working himself to exhaustion at 2 jobs to support his daughter. Significant debt from medical bills. Behind on rent. No child support from your ex-wife. Military career cut short by injury and trauma. Richard's expression was compassionate. You're drowning, Mr. Tate, and you're too proud to ask for help. I don't need charity. This isn't charity. This is a debt we owe you. Richard pulled out a folder and set it on the table. I'd like to offer you a position as head of personal security for Skylar. A 6-figure salary, full benefits including health insurance for you and Jade, housing provided, and signing bonus sufficient to clear all your existing debts. Hunter stared at the folder like it might explode. I'm not a security professional. I'm a waiter. You're a decorated Navy SEAL with combat experience and the proven ability to neutralize threats. Alana spoke from the doorway, where she'd been standing quietly. Your instincts in that parking garage were textbook perfect. You assessed the situation, called for backup, engaged when necessary, and prioritized the victim's safety throughout. That's better than half my current team would have done. Alana would oversee your training in the specific protocols we use. Richard continued. But fundamentally, Mr. Tate, I trust you. My daughter trusts you. And frankly, after what happened, traditional security isn't enough. I need someone who will actually put themselves between danger and the people they're protecting. You've already proven you'll do exactly that. Hunter's mind was reeling. 6 figures. Housing. Debt cleared. It was everything he'd been desperately working toward, handed to him on a silver platter. Every practical bone in his body was screaming at him to accept. What about Jade? He asked. This job, being personal security, it would mean being with Skylar constantly. Travel. Late nights. Unpredictable schedule. I can't abandon my daughter. You wouldn't have to, Skylar spoke up. The guest house you'd live in is fully furnished, 3 bedrooms. There's a private school on the estate for staff children, excellent teachers, small classes. Jade would be safe here, cared for, getting a better education than I can currently provide, Hunter finished quietly. You don't have to dance around it. I'm not trying to insult you, Skylar said quickly. I'm trying to help. You saved my life, Hunter. Let me help yours. He looked at the folder, at the numbers that would transform everything. No more double shifts. No more choosing between groceries and utilities. No more lying awake at night doing impossible math, trying to make $47 stretch until next payday. But it meant accepting help from people whose world he didn't belong to. It meant owing them, being beholden, losing his independence. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course, Richard said immediately. Take whatever time you need. Though I should mention, the men who tried to take Skylar, we still haven't apprehended all of them. Until we do, both you and Jade remain potential targets. This position would provide protection for both of you. And, there it was, the hook underneath the generous offer. Accept the job and be safe. Refuse and put Jade at risk. That's not fair, Hunter said quietly. No, Richard agreed. It's not. But it's reality. I'm not trying to manipulate you, Mr. Tate. I'm trying to protect everyone involved, including you and your daughter. This arrangement benefits us all." Skylar touched his arm gently. "Come see the guest house at least. Let Jade see the school. Make an informed decision." So Hunter let them show him around the estate. The guest house was beautiful, modern and spacious, with a full kitchen and comfortable furniture. Jade's potential bedroom was twice the size of her current one, with built-in bookshelves and a window seat overlooking the gardens. The school building was impressive, state-of-the-art facilities and enthusiastic teachers. When they walked through, Jade's eyes went wide at the science lab and art studio and library filled with more books than she'd ever seen. "Can I really go to school here?" she whispered to Hunter. "Maybe, baby. We're still deciding." But he could see in her face that she wanted to. Wanted the nice room and the good school, and the safety of high walls and security guards. She was 7 years old. She shouldn't have to worry about whether bad men might come after her father. That evening, back in their cramped apartment with Mrs. Alvarez making dinner in the kitchen, Hunter sat Jade down for a serious conversation. "What did you think of the Bowen's house?" he asked. "It was like a castle," Jade said. "And Skylar is really nice. She showed me her room and let me play with her old toys. She said if we lived there, we could be friends. Would you want that? To live there and go to school there?" Jade was quiet for a moment, unusually serious for a 7-year-old. "Would you be happy, Daddy?" The question caught him off guard. "This isn't about me being happy, baby. It's about what's best for you. But you're always tired. You work all the day. Time. You worry about money even though you think I don't notice." She took his hand. "If living at the castle means you're not tired anymore, then I want to live there." Hunter felt his throat tighten. His daughter, his beautiful, perceptive daughter, had been carrying that awareness all along, knowing he struggled, wanting to help, being too young to do anything but notice. "I love you so much, Jade. I love you too, Daddy. And I think we should say yes, because Skylar needs you to keep her safe, and we need to be safe too, and it's okay to let people help us sometimes." Out of the mouths of babes, Hunter thought. His 7-year-old daughter had more wisdom than he'd given her credit for. That night, he sent a text to Richard Bowen. "I accept the position. When do I start?" The response came within minutes. "Monday. Welcome to the family, Hunter." Hunter sat in his apartment, the place that had been his entire world for 3 years, and felt the weight of the decision settle over him. His life was about to change in ways he couldn't fully imagine. He was stepping into a world of wealth and privilege and danger, leaving behind the familiar struggle of survival. But he was doing it for Jade, for her safety, her future, her chance at something better than he'd been able to provide on his own. And if he was being completely honest with himself, he was doing it for Skylar too. Because she'd looked at him with trust in her eyes. Because she'd said, "We could be friends." Because somewhere in the chaos of that parking garage, a connection had formed between them that he couldn't quite name but couldn't ignore. Whatever came next, Hunter Tate was committed. No turning back now. Moving day came faster than Hunter expected. Within 72 hours, his entire life had been packed into boxes, loaded into trucks, and transported to the Bowen estate. The efficiency was simultaneously impressive and unsettling, a reminder of how much power wealth could wield. The guest house that would be their new home was ready and waiting. Furniture arranged, kitchen stocked, Jade's room decorated with input from Skylar, who'd apparently taken personal interest in making a 7-year-old feel welcome. "This is really ours?" Jade asked for the 3rd time, running from room to room with boundless energy. "Really ours," Hunter confirmed, though it felt surreal saying it. 2 weeks ago, he'd been a waiter scraping by. Now he lived on a billionaire's estate with a salary that made his head spin, and responsibilities he was still trying to fully understand. Mrs. Alvarez had come to help them settle in, though Hunter suspected she mainly wanted to see the place for herself and make sure he wasn't getting in over his head. "It's beautiful," she admitted, running her hand over the granite kitchen counters. "Very beautiful. But Hunter, are you sure about this? These people, their world, it's so different from yours." "I know." He was unpacking boxes of clothes, hanging them in a closet bigger than Jade's old bedroom. "But it's good money, good security, and Jade will have opportunities here I could never give her on my own." "Money isn't everything," says someone who's never had to choose between buying groceries and paying the electric bill. Hunter immediately regretted the sharp tone. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that." Mrs. Alvarez squeezed his shoulder. "I know you're under stress. Just promise me you won't lose yourself in all this. You're a good man, Hunter. Don't let their wealth make you forget your worth." Before Hunter could respond, there was a knock on the door. Alana stood outside, professional as always, in her dark suit. "Mr. Tate, sorry to interrupt your settling in, but we need to begin your training. The sooner you're up to speed on our protocols, the better." Hunter glanced at Mrs. Alvarez, who nodded. "Go. Jade and I will finish unpacking." The next 6 hours were intense. Alana walked Hunter through the estate's security systems, communication protocols, threat assessment procedures, and emergency response plans. She was thorough and demanding, clearly testing whether he could actually handle the job or if Richard Bowen had made a mistake hiring him out of gratitude. "The primary objective is always Miss Bowen's safety," Alana explained as they walked the perimeter of the estate. "Secondary objectives are maintaining her schedule and privacy. You'll accompany her to public events, business meetings, social engagements. You need to be alert but unobtrusive, protective but not overbearing." Sounds like a delicate balance. It is. Most security personnel fail because they either become paranoid and make the client feel suffocated, or they get complacent and miss legitimate threats. She stopped walking and faced him directly. "What happened in that parking garage? That was instinct and courage. This job requires discipline and patience. Can you do both?" Hunter met her gaze steadily. "I was a SEAL for 6 years. Discipline and patience were literally part of the job description. Military discipline is different from civilian security. You can't just neutralize threats anymore. There are legal ramifications, public relations considerations, client preferences that might conflict with optimal security protocols." Alana's expression was challenging. "You're going to have moments where your instinct says one thing and your job requires another. Can you handle that?" "I guess we'll find out." Over the next week, Hunter was thrown into intensive training, hand-to-hand combat refreshers with Alana's team, who were surprised and grudgingly impressed by how much of his military skills he'd retained. Firearms qualifications at a private range on the estate, defensive driving courses, threat recognition scenarios, protocol after protocol, procedure after procedure. It was exhausting but familiar in a way his waiter jobs had never been. This was closer to his old life, the structure and discipline and purpose. His body remembered the training, even if his mind had tried to forget. Jade, meanwhile, was thriving. The estate school had welcomed her warmly, and she'd made friends immediately with the daughter of Richard's executive assistant. She came home each day bubbling with stories about science experiments and art projects and a library where you could borrow any book you wanted. "I love it here, Daddy," she announced one evening at dinner in their little guest house kitchen. "Can we stay forever?" "We'll see, baby. Let's take it one day at a time." But Hunter could already feel himself being pulled into the Bowen family's orbit in ways that made one day at a time feel like a fantasy. Skylar was the center of that orbit. His job meant being with her constantly, learning her schedule and habits, anticipating her needs, staying alert for threats while trying not to make her feel like a prisoner. She made it easier than it should have been. Unlike what Hunter had expected from a billionaire's daughter, Skylar was down to earth and considerate. She asked his opinions, respected his expertise, and never treated him like hired help. "What do you think about this route?" she'd ask before a public appearance, showing him the planned path through a venue. Too exposed, Hunter would say, pointing out sightlines and exit points. Better to enter through the service corridor and approach from the east. And she'd listen, adjust her plans, trust his judgment. They fell into a rhythm over those first weeks. Early mornings when Skylar went for runs around the estate with Hunter shadowing her, staying alert while she enjoyed the exercise. Days spent at Bowen Technologies headquarters, where Hunter learned to blend into the background during meetings while remaining ready to respond to any threat. Evenings, when Skylar would sometimes join Hunter and Jade for dinner, laughing at Jade's stories and treating his daughter like she mattered. It was during one of those dinners that Hunter realized the job was becoming something more complicated than he'd anticipated. Skylar was helping Jade with math homework, explaining fractions using slices of pizza as visual aids, and Jade was giggling at Skylar's exaggerated explanations. They looked natural together, easy, like family. And Hunter felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with gratitude or professional respect, and everything to do with how Skylar's smile made him feel, how her presence had become something he looked forward to rather than just tolerated. That was dangerous. She was his employer's daughter. She was from a world so far removed from his that they might as well be different species. Getting emotionally involved would be catastrophic for his job, his stability, Jade's security. But knowing something was dangerous and being able to stop it were two very different things. Hunter. Skylar's voice pulled him from his thoughts. You okay? You zoned out. Sorry. Just tired. Long day. She studied him with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see more than he wanted to reveal. You're doing great, you know. The team respects you. Alana says, you're picking everything up faster than anyone she's trained, and Jade is so happy here. Thanks to you, the way you've welcomed her, made her feel at home, it means everything. She's a great kid. You've done an amazing job raising her alone. Skylar's expression softened. I know this hasn't been easy, adjusting to all of this. But I'm glad you're here, Hunter. I feel safer with you around. There it was again. That warmth, that connection. That feeling of something more developing beneath the surface of professional relationship. Hunter stood abruptly. I should get Jade ready for bed. Early day tomorrow with that board meeting. If Skylar noticed the sudden distance he was creating, she didn't comment. She just smiled and said goodnight, leaving Hunter alone with his daughter and his complicated feelings. Later that night, after Jade was asleep and the guest house was quiet, Hunter stood at his window looking across the grounds toward the main house. Lights glowed in Skylar's suite on the second floor. He'd accepted this job for good reasons. Security, stability, opportunities for Jade. But he hadn't anticipated how difficult it would be to maintain professional boundaries when Skylar looked at him like he mattered, when she made him feel seen in ways he hadn't experienced since before his marriage fell apart. His phone buzzed. A text from Alana. Security briefing tomorrow, 6 a.m., new intel on the kidnapping suspects. Right. Because this wasn't just about navigating complicated feelings. There were still real threats out there, people who wanted to hurt Skylar, people who might see Hunter as an obstacle to eliminate. The job wasn't just protection anymore, it was personal. He cared about Skylar's safety not just because she paid his salary, but because the thought of anything happening to her made his chest tighten with genuine fear. That should have been his first warning that he was in over his head. But Hunter had never been good at heeding warnings, especially when someone he cared about needed protecting. He'd figure out how to handle the complicated emotions later. Right now, he had a job to do, a daughter to raise, and a woman to keep safe. Everything else was just noise, or so he told himself as he finally turned away from the window and tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges he wasn't quite prepared to face. The security briefing at 6 in the morning was grim. Alana had arranged the conference room with crime scene photos, surveillance footage, and intelligence reports spread across the table. Richard Bowen sat at the head, his usual composure cracked by visible worry. Skylar was there too. Despite Alana's suggestion, she skipped this meeting. We've identified all 3 men from the parking garage attack, Alana began, pulling up photos on the screen. Victor Ross, the leader. Criminal record spanning 12 years, specializing in high-value kidnappings. His team included Danny Wells and Craig Foster, both ex-military with dishonorable discharges. Hunter studied the faces, committing them to memory. These were the men who'd tried to take Skylar, who'd cut him, who remained a threat. Wells is in custody, Alana continued. He was the one you knocked unconscious, Mr. Tate. But Ross and Foster are still in the wind. And we've received credible intelligence that they're planning retaliation. The room went silent. What kind of retaliation? Richard's voice was tight. The intelligence suggests they've expanded their target list. Originally, they were contracted to kidnap Skylar for ransom. Now, it's personal. They want revenge against Mr. Tate for disrupting their operation, and they see both Skylar and Jade as leverage points. Hunter's blood turned cold. They're targeting my daughter? We intercepted communications suggesting they've been surveilling the estate, looking for vulnerabilities. They know Jade attends school here, know your routines, know the security protocols. Alana's expression was apologetic. I'm sorry, Mr. Tate. Your intervention made you a target. This is my fault, Skylar said. Her voice strained. Hunter got involved because of me. Now his daughter is in danger because of me. This is the fault of criminals, not yours, Richard said firmly. The question is what we do about it. Enhanced security protocols, Alana said. No one enters or leaves the estate without armed escort. All school activities moved inside the gates. Mr. Tate and Jade should relocate to the main house temporarily, where security is tightest. Absolutely not. Hunter stood abruptly. I'm not putting Jade through more upheaval, more fear. She just settled in here. Her safety is more important than her comfort, Alana countered. I can protect my daughter against professional kidnappers who now have a specific vendetta against you. Alana's voice rose slightly. Your courage is admirable, Mr. Tate, but your judgment is compromised when it comes to your family. Then I quit. The words came out before Hunter fully thought them through. I'll take Jade and disappear. Change our names. Move somewhere far away where these people can't find us. Hunter, no. Skylar stood as well, moving toward him. You can't run. They'll find you. People like Ross, they have resources and connections. Running just makes you more vulnerable. Staying here makes Jade a target. She's already a target. Skylar's voice cracked. Because you saved me. Because you're a good man who did the right thing. And I will not let you run away and live in fear because of a choice I'm grateful you made. Richard cleared his throat. Perhaps we're all too emotionally invested in this discussion. Let's take a breath and think strategically. But Hunter couldn't think strategically. All he could think about was Jade in danger. About men with guns and plans coming for his little girl, because he'd been stupid enough to play hero. The meeting ended with tense compromises. Enhanced security, yes. Relocation to the main house, under discussion. Hunter maintaining his position, contingent on following updated protocols. He left the conference room feeling like he was suffocating. The next week was tense. Hunter shadowed Skylar during the day while constantly worrying about Jade at school. Security teams swept the estate twice daily. Everyone was on edge, waiting for something to happen. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Hunter was with Skylar at the estate's office building when his phone rang. The school director, voice shaking. Mr. Tate, there's been an incident. Jade is safe, but you need to come immediately. His heart stopped. What kind of incident? A man tried to access the school grounds. Claimed he was Jade's uncle. Said he was authorized to pick her up. Our security stopped him. But Mr. Tate, he had photos of Jade. He knew her schedule. Hunter was already moving, Skylar right behind him. Lock down the school. No one in or out. I'm 2 minutes away. He drove faster than was safe, reaching the school building to find it surrounded by security personnel. Inside, Jade sat in the director's office with a female guard, looking small and scared. "Daddy!" She ran to him, and Hunter scooped her up, holding her so tight she squeaked in protest. "Are you okay? Did anyone try to hurt you?" "I'm okay. The teachers kept us inside during lockdown. But Daddy, I'm scared. Why would someone pretend to be my uncle? Because bad people wanted to use her to hurt him. Because his past had caught up to them. Because he'd made enemies trying to do the right thing. We're going to keep you safe," he promised. "I swear to you, Jade, nothing bad will happen." But even as he said it, Hunter knew he couldn't guarantee that. Not really. Not against determined professionals who'd already proven they could penetrate security, gather intelligence, and plan sophisticated operations. That evening, Alana showed him surveillance footage from the school perimeter. A man matching Craig Foster's description, watching from a vehicle parked just outside the property line. Close enough to observe, far enough to avoid immediate detection. "They're escalating," Alana said. "Testing our response times, looking for patterns they can exploit." This wasn't a serious attempt to take Jade. It was reconnaissance. "Then what's the serious attempt going to look like?" Hunter demanded. "I don't know, but it's coming." That night, Hunter made a decision. He found Richard in his study and laid out his terms. "I'll stay and do this job. I'll protect Skylar with everything I have. But you need to promise me something." "Name it." "If they come for Jade, if there's a real attack, you get her out. Private plane, secure location, bodyguards around the clock. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes. Promise me she'll be safe even if I'm not there to protect her." Richard studied him for a long moment. "You're talking about a scenario where you don't survive. I'm talking about making sure my daughter lives no matter what happens to me." Hunter's voice was steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "That's not negotiable. You have my word. Jade will be protected as if she were my own granddaughter." "Thank you." As Hunter left the study, he nearly collided with Skylar in the hallway. She'd clearly been listening. "You can't think like that," she said, tears in her eyes. "Planning for your own death, like you're expendable. I'm a father first, Skylar. Everything else is secondary. You're also a person who deserves to live, to be happy, to have a future." She grabbed his hand. "We'll get through this together. All of us. You don't have to sacrifice yourself." Hunter wanted to believe her. But deep down, he knew that if it came down to choosing between his life and Jade's safety, there was no choice at all. He'd already made it the moment she was born. The attack came 3 days later, and it came from an unexpected direction. Hunter was doing a routine security sweep of the estate's western perimeter when the explosion rocked the main gate. Not close enough to cause casualties, but loud enough to trigger every alarm and draw security resources to the entrance. It was a diversion. Hunter knew it instantly. "All units, this is Tate," he barked into his radio. "Maintain positions at primary locations. Do not converge on the gate. This is a distraction." "Mr. Tate, protocol requires we secure the breach point," one of the security team leaders responded. "Protocol is exactly what they're counting on. Keep half your teams at school and main house. Trust me." Alana's voice cut through. "Listen to him. Maintain defensive positions." Hunter was already moving back toward the school building, instinct screaming that Jade was the real target. He was 50 yards away when he saw them, 2 figures approaching from the wooded area behind the facility, moving fast and purposeful. Ross and Foster. He recognized them from the surveillance photos. They had bolt cutters for the fence and weapons holstered at their sides. Professional, prepared, and clearly confident their diversion had worked. Hunter didn't call for backup. No time. He just ran, closing the distance before they could breach the perimeter. "Stop right there." His voice was command, trained, absolute authority. Both men turned, and recognition flashed across Ross's face. "The waiter should have killed you in that parking garage." "You should have stayed gone," Hunter replied, positioning himself between them and the school. "Leave now, and maybe you survive this." Ross laughed. "Big talk for one man against 2. We came prepared this time." "Foster," pulled his weapon, but Hunter was already moving. 6 years of SEAL training, thousands of hours of combat drills, all of it activated in a heartbeat. He closed the distance before Foster could aim properly, grabbed the gun hand, and used the man's own momentum to slam him into the fence. The weapon discharged, the shot going wide. Hunter twisted Foster's wrist until bones cracked and the gun fell. A brutal elbow to the temple and Foster dropped, unconscious. Ross was smarter. He didn't draw his weapon in close quarters. Instead, he pulled a tactical knife, the same kind that had opened Hunter's side in the parking garage. "Feels familiar, doesn't it?" Ross circled, looking for an opening. "Except this time I'm not surprised. This time I know what you can do." "Then you know you're going to lose." They clashed in a flurry of motion. Ross was skilled, trained, dangerous, but Hunter fought with something Ross couldn't match: the absolute certainty that failure meant Jade's death. That kind of motivation made you faster, stronger, willing to take hits that would stop a normal fighter. Hunter took a slash across his forearm, blocking a strike aimed at his throat, ignored the pain and drove forward, inside Ross's guard, landing a combination that would have dropped most men. Ross staggered but stayed upright, swinging wildly. The knife caught Hunter across the shoulder, shallow but painful. He grabbed Ross's knife hand with both of his own, controlling the weapon, and headbutted the man with everything he had. Ross's nose exploded in blood. But Ross was desperate now, fueled by his own survival instinct. He kneed Hunter in the ribs, right where the stitches from the previous encounter had barely healed. Pain, white-hot and overwhelming, flooded through Hunter's body. His grip loosened. Ross saw the opening and went for it, raising the knife for a killing strike. The gunshot cracked through the air. Ross stumbled, the knife falling from his hand. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, confusion on his face, then collapsed. Hunter turned to see Alana 30 yards away, her weapon still raised. Other security personnel flooding in behind her. "Clear," someone shouted. "Suspects neutralized." Hunter's legs gave out. He dropped to his knees, adrenaline deserting him all at once, leaving just pain and exhaustion and overwhelming relief. "Jade," he managed to gasp. "Is Jade safe?" Alana said, reaching him. "School's locked down. She never even knew anything was happening." She looked at his bleeding shoulder and arm. "You're hurt. Again. Seems to be a pattern." Paramedics arrived, along with police. The next hours blurred together, statements given, wounds treated, crime scene processed. Ross was dead. Foster was in custody with multiple broken bones and a concussion. The threat was over. Richard found Hunter in the estate's medical facility, getting stitches for the second time in a month. "The FBI is taking over the investigation," Richard said. "They've connected Ross and Foster to 6 other kidnapping attempts across 4 states. You stopped a significant criminal operation, Hunter. I just protected my daughter. You did more than that. You protected Skylar. You protected this family. You put yourself in harm's way twice now without hesitation." Richard's expression was serious. "That kind of loyalty, that kind of courage, it's rare. I want you to know you have a place here for as long as you want it." Hunter nodded, too exhausted to form a proper response. Skylar appeared in the doorway, and the moment she saw Hunter was okay, she burst into tears. She rushed to his side, careful of his injuries, and just held his hand while crying. "You could have died," she said through tears. "Again, because of me. Because you keep putting yourself between me and danger. That's literally my job description." "It's more than a job." She looked at him with red, puffy eyes. "You know it's more than a job." Hunter did know. Had known for weeks if he was being honest. But admitting it out loud felt dangerous in a different way than facing armed kidnappers. "Skylar, don't," she interrupted. "Don't tell me it's complicated, or inappropriate, or that we're from different worlds. I've heard all those arguments in my own head, but watching you risk your life today, thinking I might lose you, it made something very clear." "What's that?" "That life's too short to ignore how I feel. How we both feel. She squeezed his hand. When you're healed, when all this is really over, I want to have a conversation about what happens next. Not as employer and employee, as two people who care about each other. Hunter should have said no, should have maintained professional boundaries, should have protected both their hearts from the inevitable complications. Instead, he squeezed her hand back and said, "Okay, we'll talk." Because she was right. Life was too short. And he'd been running from connection, from vulnerability, from the possibility of happiness for too long. Maybe it was time to be brave in a different way. 2 months after the attack, the Bowen estate had returned to something approaching normalcy. Enhanced security remained, but the constant tension had eased. Ross was gone, Foster was facing multiple life sentences, and the FBI had dismantled the entire kidnapping network. Hunter had healed, the new scars joining the old ones as permanent reminders of the cost of courage. He'd also settled fully into his role as head of Skylar's security, earning the respect of the entire team through competence and leadership. But the conversation Skylar had promised, the one about what happened next between them, kept getting postponed. First by his recovery, then by her father's concerns about propriety, then by their own mutual fear of what acknowledging their feelings might mean. It was Jade who finally forced the issue. "Daddy," she said one evening after school, "why don't you and Skylar go on dates like normal people who like each other?" Hunter nearly choked on his dinner. "What makes you think Skylar and I like each other?" Jade gave him the look only a 7-year-old could give. The one that said adults were incredibly stupid sometimes. "Everyone knows. The guards talk about it. Nina says you look at Skylar like she's made of sunshine. And Skylar smiles different when you're around. Nina should mind her own business. So you do like her." Jade looked triumphant. "Then why don't you tell her?" "It's complicated, baby." "Why?" Such a simple question. Why was it complicated? Because of his past. Because of their different backgrounds. Because he was afraid of being hurt again after Vanessa left? Or was he just making excuses because being vulnerable was scarier than facing armed criminals? "You know what?" Hunter said, making a decision. "You're right. It shouldn't be complicated." He found Skylar in the estate's library that evening, reading by the fireplace. She looked up when he entered, and her face did exactly what Jade had described, lighting up in a way that made his chest tight. "Hey," she said softly. "Everything okay? I've been thinking about that conversation you wanted to have." "Oh." She set down her book, suddenly nervous. "I wasn't sure you still wanted to." "I didn't, honestly. I was scared." Hunter sat across from her. "My ex-wife left because she couldn't handle who I became after the military. The PTSD, the nightmares, the way I was broken. I've been terrified of letting anyone close again, of being vulnerable and having them realize I'm not worth the trouble." "Hunter, let me finish." He took a breath. "But then I realized something. You've already seen me at my worst. Bleeding, terrified, fighting for my life. You've seen my scars, literal and figurative. And you're still here, still looking at me the way you're looking at me right now. How am I looking at you? Like I matter. Like I'm worth something beyond my ability to protect people." He leaned forward. "I care about you, Skylar. More than I should, more than is probably wise, but I'm done pretending I don't." Skylar's eyes were shining. "I care about you too. Have for weeks, but I didn't want to pressure you or make you feel obligated because you work for my family. So what do we do about it?" "We try," she said simply. "We see where this goes, carefully, slowly, but honestly. No more pretending we're just employer and employee when we both know it's more." Hunter reached across the space between them and took her hand. "I come with complications. A daughter, a traumatic past, scars inside and out. I come with wealth that makes people treat me differently, a family name that carries expectations, and my own share of trauma after almost being kidnapped." She smiled. "We're both complicated, Hunter. Maybe that's why this works. Their first real date was purposely simple. Dinner at a quiet restaurant in town, away from the estate and its constant security presence. Just the two of them talking, learning each other beyond the crisis that had brought them together. Hunter learned that Skylar had wanted to be a teacher before her father convinced her to join the family business. That she loved old movies and terrible reality TV. That she was funny and smart and surprisingly down to earth despite being raised in wealth. Skylar learned about Hunter's military service, the details he usually kept private. About his father who died when he was young, his mother who'd remarried and moved to Florida. About the dreams he'd had before life got complicated. About the man he'd been before becoming a father and a survivor. "I like who you are now," Skylar said as they walked to the car after dinner. "The man who works hard and loves his daughter and risks everything to help people. That's who you really are, Hunter. Everything else is just context." He kissed her then, right there in the parking lot. And it felt like coming home after a long deployment. Natural, right, like something he'd been missing without knowing it. When they returned to the estate, Jade was still awake, despite the late hour. Apparently, having convinced Mrs. Alvarez to let her wait up. "Did you have a good date?" she asked, with barely contained excitement. "The best," Skylar said, ruffling Jade's hair. "Your dad is quite the gentleman." "He's the best dad in the world," Jade said loyally, then looked at Skylar hopefully. "Does this mean you're going to be around more? Like, all the time? If that's okay with you." "It's super okay." Over the following months, their relationship deepened. Skylar spent more evenings at the guest house, having dinner with Hunter and Jade, helping with homework, becoming part of their small family unit. They took it slowly, mindful of Jade's feelings and the complicated dynamics of their situation. Richard gave his blessing, albeit with fatherly warnings about treating his daughter well. Alana remained professionally neutral, though Hunter caught her smiling at them occasionally. The estate staff, who'd been speculating for months, were universally supportive. Hunter found himself happy in a way he hadn't been in years. The nightmares came less frequently. The hypervigilance eased. He was still watchful, still protective, but he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. One evening, as they sat together on the guest house porch watching Jade play in the yard, Skylar leaned against his shoulder and said, "You know what's funny?" "What?" "You saved my life that night in the parking garage. But, somehow, I think we saved each other." Hunter wrapped his arm around her, careful of the healing scars on both their bodies, and realized she was absolutely right. Sometimes courage meant running toward danger. And sometimes it meant opening your heart, when every instinct said to protect yourself. He'd done both, and somehow, miraculously, he'd found exactly what he needed. 5 years later, Hunter Tate stood in the parking garage at 847 Ashford Avenue, the exact spot where everything had changed. The concrete pillar still bore a small dent from where he'd slammed the first attacker. The fluorescent lights still flickered ominously overhead. But Hunter himself was completely transformed. He wasn't alone. Jade, now 12 years old and growing into a confident young woman, stood beside him. Skylar held his hand, a diamond ring, catching the harsh lighting, and Richard Bowen stood with them, looking contemplative. "This is where it happened?" Jade asked. She'd heard the story countless times, but had never seen the actual location. "Right here," Hunter confirmed. "Your old dad played hero and changed our lives forever." "You're not old," Skylar protested with a smile. "And you didn't play hero. You were one." They'd come back for a reason. The parking garage was being demolished next month, replaced by a community center that the Bowen Foundation was funding. Hunter had requested one final visit to the place where his old life ended and his new one began. "Do you ever regret it?" Richard asked quietly. "That split-second decision that put you and Jade in danger, that completely upended your life?" Hunter thought about the question seriously. He thought about the scars he carried, the trauma Jade had experienced, the fear and uncertainty of those first months. Then he thought about everything that had come after. He'd married Skylar 2 years ago in a small ceremony with only close friends and family. Jade had been the flower girl, bursting with pride and joy. They lived together now in a beautiful home on the estate, a blended family that somehow worked despite all the complications. Hunter had expanded his role beyond just personal security. He now ran the Bowen Foundation's Community Safety Initiative, training civilians in threat awareness and response. He'd helped establish programs in 30 cities, teaching people that heroism wasn't about being fearless, it was about acting despite fear. Jade thrived in ways that would have been impossible in their old life. Top of her class, confident and compassionate, with opportunities Hunter could never have provided alone. She talked about becoming a social worker, about helping families like theirs used to be. And Hunter himself had healed in ways he'd never thought possible. The nightmares had faded. The guilt over his military service had softened into acceptance. He'd found purpose beyond just surviving, beyond just protecting his daughter. He'd found a way to turn one moment of courage into lasting change. No regrets. Hunter said finally, "Not a single one." "Good," Richard said, emotion thick in his voice. "Because you gave me my daughter back. You gave yourself a future. And you've shown thousands of people through your foundation work that ordinary people can do extraordinary things." They walked through the garage one last time, Hunter pointing out where each part of the confrontation had happened, where he'd made the decision to intervene, where he'd fought, where he'd nearly died. "I was terrified," he admitted. "Every second of it. I wasn't some fearless action hero. I was a broke single dad who was absolutely certain I was about to get killed." "But you did it anyway," Jade said. "That's what makes it brave, right? Being scared but doing it anyway." "Exactly right, baby girl." As they left the garage and emerged into bright afternoon sunlight, Hunter took one last look back. That place had been the site of violence and fear, but also of courage and transformation. It had been the crucible where he'd discovered who he really was beneath the struggle and exhaustion. "You know what I learned from all this?" Hunter said as they walked to the car. "It's not about being special or having superpowers or being destined for greatness. It's about making the choice to help when you see someone in trouble. Anyone can do that. Anyone can be a hero if they're willing to try." "That's the message we need to keep spreading," Skylar said, squeezing his hand. "Through the foundation, through your training programs, through sharing your story. One person acting with courage can change everything." They drove back to the estate, past the neighborhoods where Hunter used to work his double shifts, past the diner where he'd served breakfast for tips, past all the markers of his old life. He'd come so far from that exhausted waiter who could barely make rent. But at his core, he was still the same person. Still someone who ran toward trouble instead of away from it. Still someone who believed that helping others mattered more than helping yourself. Still a father who would do anything to protect his daughter. The difference now was that he wasn't doing it alone. He had a family, a purpose, and proof that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is act when everyone else freezes. Hunter Tate had saved a billionaire's daughter in a parking garage 5 years ago. But the truth was, they'd saved each other. And the ripples from that one moment of courage were still spreading, inspiring others, creating change, proving that goodness still existed in the world. One split-second decision. One act of courage. One life transformed. And countless others touched by the example. That was the real legacy. Not the money or status or recognition, but the simple truth that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they chose courage over comfort. And Hunter Tate would spend the rest of his life making sure people knew that truth, sharing his story, training others, and proving every single day that heroes weren't born. They were made in moments like that rainy night in a parking garage, when someone decided that another person's life was worth risking everything for. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was the story worth telling. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. so you don't miss any upload from us.